Friends, Ross McEwan became Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of National Australia Bank in December 2019. Wow, that was just before COVID. Ross has had more than 30 years of experience in the financial services industry, spanning banking, insurance and investment. He joined NAB from the Royal Bank of Scotland, where he served as the RBS Group CEO from 2013 to 2019, the CEO of the UK Retail from 2012 to 2013. Prior to this, Ross held executive roles at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, the first New Zealand capital securities, and the National Mutual Life Association of Australasia and AXA New Zealand. He is also a director of the Australian Banking Association and the Financial Markets Foundation for Children. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Ross McEwan, the Managing Director and CEO of NAB, to the stage.
Thank you very much, Paul, and it's superb to be here with you this afternoon. Sam, can I just congratulate you on what an amazing lunch you and your committee have put on here. Michael Sadi, who I love dearly, said to me, Ross, would you come and speak to a few of my friends at the Lebanese community? He didn't tell me there were going to be about 500 people rock up today, but I'll talk to him later. It's great to be here. I also just love the introduction where, you said you love NAB. You asked everybody to stand up and hug each other on behalf of NAB. Thank you very much, CBA, for being able to do that. It was delightful. It was great to see. It's probably made my day. But look, it is great that we've got banking community here. And as we've heard, I think banking does play a huge part in building societies and helping businesses really prosper. And I'm proud to be part of the banking community, and I know all of our other banking colleagues here will be exactly the same. So thank you. The last time I was here at Dalton House was only about a couple of months ago, and it was the start of the fundraising event for the Salvation Army, and they're customers of ours. And I've been out and seen many of their groupings of recent times, and it actually gives you a really good insight into about what's really happening in Australia at certain parts of the Australian community. And it's certainly their Red Shield appeal is certainly worthwhile getting them behind when you see the work they do. So nice to be here again, and the food and of course the service is always sensational here. Today I thought I'd just give you a couple of topics because there's just so many things that we could talk about. And I'm sure we'll pick up some of those through the Q&A, which I'd rather do rather than stand and talk to you or more at you. But I thought I'd just pick up on a couple of topics today. One of them is the resilience of this economy, and I know we're all interested in that. And the second one is the growing threat of scams that are going on in our society. And I think those are two pretty biggies that we'll have some chat about and maybe pick some under the question and answer. Just firstly on the Australian economy, look, it's clear that activity has slowed from this time last year, and we saw that in the GDP stats that came out this week. The economy is slowing, and you've got to have it slowing with the impact of 12 interest rate rises in 12 months. Must at some point bite into an economy and slow it down. Remember, we had, I think it was 11 drops in interest rates over an 11-year period. To take it down to next to zero and moving them back up to 4.1 over such a short period of time was really meant to put the brakes on this economy, and it's starting to do so. It's certainly slowing down. Now, this isn't investment advice, so I'd like to put that out for just in case there's anybody reporting back to a regulator. But I do feel that the interest rates have got to the peak. We're pretty much there. If there's one more left in the Reserve Bank this year, I'd be a wee bit surprised that they could. But I think at around that 4.1, it's showing that things are slowing down enough that the big tool that the Reserve Bank has is working, and about 4.1. And if we get another one, that'll be it. I don't think it'll make much difference. And so it feels like we're at the top of the cycle. And I suspect midway through next year, we may even see interest rates coming off a wee bit through the midway through next year into the latter part of next year. Because I think at that point, we'll have to get this economy moving again. And look, there's always a big lag between the rate changes and for them to work through an economy. And it's been much more pronounced given the time as fixed rate demand surged pre the Reserve Bank starting to move rates. A lot of customers moved on to a fixed rate home mortgage. And that's just not something you'd see normally in the Australian market. We're a variable rate sort of country, but before the interest rates started moving, people moved on to a 2 or 3 year interest rate fixed, and that has still got some time to wander its way through. And that also means that it's slower impact as the the Reserve Bank moves the interest rates up. What's really been interesting is that only about 35% of homes in Australia actually have a mortgage. So you get a lot of talk about the mortgage impact and what's going on, but about 35% of houses have a mortgage. The rest are mortgage free. And I know that's a strange one, but what it also means is the impact from interest rates doesn't hit too heavily, but the impact of having heavy inflation hits 100% of households. And that's why we have to get inflation under control, because it is hitting 100% of households. On the fixed rates, there's about 50% of the fixed rates that were put out there over the last few years still to roll through onto a new rate. So the full impact hasn't yet happened on interest rates. Look, there's been wide concern about the impact of interest rates on the household that do have mortgages. You see that in the newspapers all of the time. You know, is there a mortgage cliff coming? What will this do to households? What's been really interesting is that households have been very resilient. Very resilient. We know it's hard. We know it's harder than what it is when your interest rate's at 2% and all of a sudden you find yourself at 5 or 6. But it's interesting that households have been resilient. And previously I've spoken about where we as an organisation have gone and talked to 8,600 of the customers we thought would have the biggest impact and worry most about their interest rates going up. And can I just tell you, only 14 of that 8,600 said, I need help and I need help now. So that just shows the resilience that's out there. And since then, we've been out contacting customers who we think might be facing difficulty, and that the number who need our help is remaining very low. And I think that's a really good thing. It's great news. And we are proactively contacting customers to give them the support when they need it. But customers are making the changes in how they're spending their money, and they are budgeting. 40% of customers now have a budget where they've never had a budget in their lives before. So to me that says people are taking real responsibility for their money. They want to be good with money, and people are getting through. But that doesn't mean that there are many Australians who are really having a difficult time. And I go back to my comments on the Salvation Army. I visited their site up in Sunshine Coast about 2 months ago, and the amount of homelessness that they're having to deal with has escalated dramatically over the last 6 to 12 months. And it's something that we should just consider. There is a group that are really, really struggling with what's going on here. And that's why I do welcome ALCC, one of our regulators, focus on hardship support. And at NAB, we've actually increased the number of our colleagues in what we call NAB Assist up to about 700 colleagues who are working closely with customers who do have a difficulty. The amazing stats that we do have, though, if we can get customers ringing us early, 90% of them are back on their feet and absolutely fine within 90 days. And that's, I think, the power of what banks can do when we really focus on what customers need. We're also staying close to our community partners who are working with vulnerable Australians. Talked about Salvation Army. It's also the Good Shepherd. They're telling us they are seeing big numbers of Australians really struggling. So my message for you to tell anybody that you know that's having a difficulty, it doesn't matter what the bank is, just tell them to get in touch quickly. We can help, and the banking system will help right across the board. I do believe Australia will avoid a recession. I believe that towards the end of next year, we will be talking about an economy that is starting to grow again, steadily again. We've got strong net migration. The word is there's 400,000 people coming to this great country. Very hard to have a recession when you've got that numbers coming over that need somewhere to live, that are going to need the food, they need services. So I think this will be a great thing. We've got great natural resources that are still required around the world, and we've got very high levels of employment, which put us in a very good starting position. So I think we're well positioned for a rebound when it starts coming latter part of next year. The second topic I want to talk about was just the epidemic we have called scams. And I think Australia needs to have a really strong conversation about balancing the speed at which we want things to happen in banking to the safety which you also want. And I think about, when cars were first produced, we didn't have seat belts, we didn't have drink driving, we didn't have all of those laws around speed limits and the likes. And without these guardrails, we quickly saw the downside of having motor vehicles going faster and faster. And safeguards are also necessary in a very digital world that we live in. 99% of every payment we make is a digital payment today. Only about 1% is actually manually handled through a branch or some other source. And the digital world has shifted financial crime online as well. In the old days, they used to pick your pocket, steal your wallet. Then they moved to signing the cheque falsely that, you got money taken out of your cheque account, if any of you can remember a cheque. And then, of course, they went to the ATMs and they used to pump gas down the ATM and blow them up to try and get the canisters out of them. Well, now they've moved to online activity, and the scamming is a global phenomenon, and they are well resourced, better than most of the businesses in this room. They are multinational crime networks that are operating. Last year, NAB processed over 1 billion payments. 1 billion payments, and among that billion were about 10,800 scam incidents. So it's a pretty small number, but if you're on the back end of one of those 10,800, it was a pretty horrific experience for you and you lost a lot of money. So we're working hard to reduce this number, and we've made a lot of changes to protect our customers. This has in turn raised the question of how much change or inconvenience customers are willing to accept in this experience as we tighten up and try to slow things down. And we've seen pushback as bankers ask customers about the purpose of a substantial cash withdrawal. And I'm happy to give you some examples later of those where customers said it's none of your bloody business. Yet we're just trying to help out and make sure it is the right thing. And for years we've had conversations on how we can make things go faster for customers. And as I said, payments now happen pretty much instantaneously, and you as customers expect this to happen. So how best do we manage the convenience piece with the safety piece? And it's a difficult balancing act, but new research we're actually releasing today suggests both small business and personal customers are willing to slow things down. The study finds 1 in 2 small businesses are extremely willing for payments to be slower if they're better protected from scammers, and 4 in 10 consumers are extremely willing to slow transactions down on the same basis. Among consumers, older Australians, this is one I found interesting, are more willing to trade off speed for safety. They are also more likely to invest time in educating themselves on scams than younger people. I found that really interesting, that the young don't seem to be open to having the education on how to save themselves from these scammers. Education remains vital, both for businesses and the wider community. Yet only 15% of small businesses said they had done enough training to stay across scams, fraud and cyber security, while 40% of small businesses said they didn't do much training at all. Right? That is problematic. This is a real worry. We've got to increase this number dramatically given what's going on. Now, I know there's lots of small, medium-sized businesses represented here today, and you'll know if you're with us, we do a lot of training on monthly webinars and practice advice about latest scams and cyber threats for business. And our bank's very happy to help you about that. I know other banks are doing similar, but we're running this thing called Search. If you just go and search our security hub on nab.com.au for more information, you can sign up to our webinars whether you're a customer or not. We just want you educated. We've got 64 initiatives running, either up and running or finished now, to actually help protect our customers from devastating impacts of scams. This includes our recent announcement that we've taken all of the links off a text that you'll get from us, an SMS. There will not be an embedded link in any of those texts at all, because it's when you hit that link that often you do the most damage and give too much information away, so we've just taken them right out of the system. And another was we've introduced a lot more payment prompts to digital banking for our personal customers. So this is where we actually ask you some questions about, are you sure that that's a payment you really want to make, before you actually push the number to make it happen. And those prompts are having an impact. Since we introduced this measure in late March, we've seen an average about 250,000 in payments abandoned each day after we raise scam concerns. So there's something in the back of the customer's mind, and when we ask them the question, they pull the payment, which is a good thing. Look, we are working quickly, but there's a lot more we absolutely need to do. And in Australia, I don't know whether you know, but we've got 15 big telco pipes that come into this country that bring all the data from offshore. We need to make sure that those 15 big telco pipes are cleaned from all of this scamming and cyber activity. It's been far too easy for criminals to pretend to be linked to organisations such as banks, to the likes of the Australian Post, Linked, or even the one recently with the ATO, which cost a fortune. The banks alone can't solve the growing problem of fraud and scams. It will take a national effort to counter this global organised crime wave. And this means government, it means lots of industries and community working together to stop the crimes before they get worse in what they're doing. Those are a couple of thoughts I had. I'm sure there'll be lots of others that we can discuss. But look, thank you for having me here today. It's an absolute pleasure to be amongst the Lebanese community. It's the only function I've got to, and I've had at the head table a whiskey popped into my hand. Sam, it's a beautiful whiskey. You need to promote that to all the colleagues here about your distillery down in Tasmania. What a cracker it is. But it looks lovely to be here, and happy for Paul and I to answer whatever questions you've got. I think you said it was Chatham House rules, but I'm sure we'll have some fun doing it as well. But thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ross. Please put your hands together and thank Ross. Ross, you want to take a seat over there? Ross, you're right. The whiskey that Sam gave you, he also gave me, and it is made in Tasmania. It's amazing. Sam makes it with his own hands. Now, he'll probably explain it to us later, I imagine. But normally I go to a Greek function, someone hands me an ouzo. But I come to an Australian Lebanese function, I shoved a whiskey and I had to drink it with you. And also with Peter Bader, we were all sharing the drink. So it was tasted nice, didn't it?
Beautiful. I'm not a great whiskey drinker, but I must say it was a very, very nice whiskey. But I won't take it at every lunchtime, thank you. But
yes, but it was very smooth. Yeah, very smooth. And Sam, I'm assuming you're offering everyone here a 10% discount on the to purchase. Yeah. It said. So I don't. What was? Did you find out what the name was? Do we know what the name was? Okay. NAB's Scotch, is it? Someone said.
And we're not giving a 10% discount.
Oh, right, we're not giving. I was going to ask you about that, Ross, whether there was a 10% on the. Here we go.
Left.
Thank you, Peter. It's beautiful. So it's called Callington Mill El Sol, Tasmanian single malt whiskey, matured in ex-sherry fortified wine barrels from Spain. Would you like another drop?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, look, thank you, Peter, and if you want to buy, then please feel free to speak to Sam, and I think also with his brother Nicholas. They'll also probably have got bottles stashed in the room. Ross, what gets you up in the morning?
Well, look, if I'm brutally honest, at about 5:30, pretty much every morning, my wife gets up and goes for a run. That's usually the thing that starts my day. I don't go with her. In the old days, I might have. But that's the sort of start of the day. But what gets me up, look, I think I've worked since about age 12. And
Which is what, about 10 years ago, wasn't it?
yeah, about 10 years
yep.
ago. And I took this job at NAB because I always thought competing against it was a brilliant business bank. And what was interesting over a long period of time, it had gone from being the number one market cap bank to the number 4 market cap bank, and I thought we could change that. And so that's what gets me out of bed from a banking perspective, and it's a great challenge, and we're doing okay, but it's only as good as your customers, and it's only as good as your bankers, who many of them here today are big thanks to the NAB team. They're brilliant
And
people.
we thank all bankers. I mean, you know, bankers always cop a heap over time. If you're not the CEO of Qantas, then, you know, you're CEO of a bank and you cop it anyway. And it's a no-win situation, is it?
Well, it was also the consulting firms for a while, and then it's the airlines. So, yeah. But we had to learn a lot out of the Royal Commission. That just showed some of the things that we needed to tidy up and get back to being good banks. Look after customers and they look after their colleagues. And that's the big learning out of that Royal Commission.
And look, as I mentioned at the beginning too, Ross, we're so lucky that we've got the 4 pillars, which are the 4 banks, which are solid. I mean, you know, they're all making profit, they're all doing well, and our economy relies on a banking system that works, is efficient, and it's profitable. So when you compare that to America, where every day you sort of hear a bank collapsing, whether it's a small or medium size, the fact is we've got a solid system that works is really great.
Yeah, look, I had the experience of running the Royal Bank of Scotland, and my first year as the CEO, the loss was, I think, £4.5 billion.
Wow.
So there's only one thing worse than a bank that makes lots of money, and that's the bank that doesn't make any. So it's much better to have them making good money, and most of us are shareholders in them anyway, one way or t'other. But we've got a very good banking system here. It's well regulated, and overall, I think, pretty well regarded by customers. But, you know, it's pretty easy to bash up on a bank, but we've just got to do better and better every day.
That's true. You talked about the scams, and that everyone gets, you know, whether it's a text or whether it's an email saying, you know, your bank's, you've got a problem with your account, or, you know, you need to give us your code, or, you know, all sorts of scams happen 24/7, 7 days a week, and we're all exposed to it. What do you think we should be doing to protect ourselves?
Well, the interesting stats that I gave you, that such a percentage of small businesses really have done nothing to educate themselves on scams, fraud and cyber. Now, they're all slightly different, but they are people having a go at you, your business, and either trying to take your money or bring your business down to get money out of you. I was surprised that so few people, such a big percentage of business leaders, haven't engaged in the debate on this, because this could bring their businesses down. And that's what really worries me, that we can't do it on our own. We actually have to have all of Australia engaged in it and educated. And I was surprised how few people, 40%, just didn't think they were educated at all, hadn't done anything about it. Well, you'll do something about it when it happens to you and you lose a lot of money. Now, that's too late.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to really engage in this debate. And, you know, your bank can help with some of the things you should be looking for.
Yeah, so it's not when you receive a text or an email, you click straight away. I mean, you try to make sure that you check it first, and as they always say, ring your bank first rather than sort of clicking and assuming that it's going to be a correct engagement.
Can I also give some really simple advice to people? If in doubt, because most of this is coming through your phone, right? They'll either ring you and tell you it's your bank and you've been compromised and you need to move money urgently to stop them getting the rest. And then you think it's your bank, trustingly, as we all are, and they ask you for the details, which they're sitting on the other end, plugging that detail into their computer, flogging the money out of your bank, your account, because you've just given them all your numbers. You've given your PINs, you've given them your passwords, because you've trustingly given. Can I just give you one piece of advice? A bank will never ask you for your PINs or your password. If you could just get that today, it's been worthwhile me coming. I'll feel better for it. And feel free just to push the red button on your phone. Tell them to bugger off. It's really important you feel comfortable doing that because we're such open and honest people. And they're stealing off you. And I had a horror the other day I heard about. I was away and got rung up about it. A business with partners. One of the partners got rung up by NAB, an English voice. So remember that when you get called by an English voice saying they're from NAB, push the red button. They said your account has been compromised. This is a true story. Your account has been compromised. You immediately, there's another message, immediately you need to move money. That means you're about to be defrauded. Two of the directors started moving money. They gave them the accounts. Now remembering that first thief is on the other end of that phone, plugging the details in, got access to the accounts. They moved that money to another bank and it was ready to go offshore. Because as soon as they get it into the other account, they can move it internationally, very hard to get. The third director walked into the room and says, what's going on? They said, our accounts have been compromised and we need to move the money. And we are. And he said, hang the bloody phone up. It's a scam. And immediately rang our office. We were able to get over half of it back instantaneously because it hadn't moved far enough. But as soon as it's got offshore, your chances of getting it go down to probably, 5%. It's that bad. And it's that education that's so basic, but we get caught up in the hype of, I have to do something. So if you just step back, feel free to put the phone down, push the red button, ring your banker, but never give your details away is all I'd ask. That's just one. I've got so many of them, it's terrible.
My trick is if I don't identify the number or if it's a private number, I let it go to the voice message and then I'll take the call. If it's someone urgent, they will get in contact with me. But thank you for that. That's really important. And I think if there's anything you get out of today's session other than getting 10% discount on some of the organisations that are here, especially Paul Signorelli, one of the things is just listen to what Ross said, so it's really important. Ross, you don't sit in your office every day. You're out and about. What are customers saying to you about the economic conditions and, what the future's looking about, we've got labour shortages, we've got a housing crisis, and we've got so many issues. And thank you. What are the customers saying to you?
Well, first off, it's very clear that in some industries it's slowing down. As money gets tighter for the household, they are making decisions about where they spend their money, and they're putting it into their rent and their petrol in their car and their interest and the food and the like. So it is slowing down in some of the retail sectors. We're seeing that in our stats. It's a reality, and so it's slowing down. But you need to get out into the small businesses, be they in the cities or out in the country. I was out in country New South Wales for a week, about 2 weeks ago. Labour shortages still. If you go to the meat industry, the abattoirs, the hospitals are struggling to get hold of nurses and doctors. The schools are struggling to get teachers. The council was struggling to get hold of planning officers. It was just everywhere. So that is still a problem that businesses are tending to have. If you get into the construction industry, people are still struggling to get people to do all the work, to do the big infrastructure projects. So we've still got an issue around labour, but it is quietening down. And I think it's bifurcating a bit in the sense of those who are really struggling are really struggling. That they're struggling because everything's gone up on them. Food, petrol. The Salvation Army said they're giving out petrol vouchers to people now so they can get their kids to school, right? That's the sort of work they're having to do so they can get their kids to school and keep them connected. So parts of our society are struggling with their housing. Homelessness is up. So there's a group there that are really struggling. We should never forget that. But I think it's just slowed down, but people are finding their way through it. The travel industry, despite all this, is going very well. People see that now as an essential or something. We didn't used to. So we're moving, we're what we think are essential to, and people are making some calls. So it's slowing down, but I think we've still got a pretty robust economy tucked in underneath it all.
I mean, you're right. We have challenging times, and we have, rising interest rates, well, until recently, of course, but also rising energy costs. I mean, that's a big issue as we move away from the into renewables. Their cost is going through the roof, and governments are struggling with that as well. Housing, as we know, is a big issue. Yeah. I mean, what's gone wrong? I mean, what have we done wrong, or what can we do to fix it? I mean, it's easy just to call on governments to allow things, building to happen. But, I mean, there's got to be a strategy behind it. And I know that the Prime Minister has said he wants 1 million homes in 5 years. Well, that ain't going to happen. It's going to be very difficult for that to happen. Your thoughts?
I'd be happy to be held down, but there'll be some developers here. I think there's one thing that the state governments can do to actually get this right, and it's to shorten up the planning process and time frame to get a bloody plan done. Right? That's it. And I've recently had conversations at all levels of government, from the sitting next to the Prime Minister at a function the other day. It says housing, and we chatted about it. And I've talked to the planning minister here in New South Wales, and I've talked to all sorts. That's the one issue, because I think private enterprise will fix it if we can get the approvals through. You get them through in 3 and 6 months, not 3 and 6 years. That makes a huge difference. So that's the one thing. I've had business customers, Sunshine Coast the other day, at a premises opened while I was there, 20 years to get the planning approvals. 20 years, not kidding you, 20 years. And he didn't even end up getting what he needed, but he built. Another one in West Australia who came in hot under the collar at a business breakfast, 10 years, and had got told the night before, that he had other stages to go through, 10 years. Now that is a massive cost to a development which gets passed on to the end user. No wonder house prices are up, no wonder apartment prices are going through the roof. But I think the one thing is the planning process. We've got to truncate it down 3 to 6 months, not 3 to 6 years. That'll open it up.
Ross, you're 100% correct. I've been hammering Paul Scully, the Minister, and also the Premier and the Treasurer about doing that, because I know one developer, and I think we all know, and most of you, those who are developers, I mean, it takes them 6 to 7 years just to get on a brownfield site, not on a greenfield site. Yeah. We're talking about brownfield sites where there are no greenbill frogs or some last eucalyptus tree. We're talking about existing brownfield sites that have been used for other purposes, and whereas this developer can go up to Queensland, whether it's Gold Coast or Brisbane, and get an answer within 6 months, 7 months, and he can start building straight away.
Well, I think even yes, it's at that time, but I think some of those are taking too long as well, and it's creating problems. That is, in my mind, the one thing that needs to be fixed. And we're going to need a lot of housing.
Yeah.
We've got 400,000 people coming to this country in the next 12 months. They have to live somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? So we need our builders and our developers developing and building.
Yeah. And we can't keep relying on the government to solve the problem.
It's our problem.
Everyone's saying, they've got the housing fund now for social housing, but we really need housing for essential workers. I mean, here in Sydney, we don't have housing for police officers, health workers, cleaners, waiters, anyone in the hospitality tourism space. They can't live in Sydney.
I saw a stat that came out from the Mayor of Melbourne the other day, Sally Capp, who's, I think, a wonderful person. She did the survey that showed all of those essential service workers in Melbourne, they were driving an average of 20 kilometres to get to their place of work. Now that is the group that can ill afford to do that travel, but there is just no accommodation for them that they can afford in a close enough area to where they work. And those are the sort of social housing and affordable housing issues that I think we all need to lead into. But the one thing is get the planning process sorted And I believe the private enterprise and banks and everybody else will get on and do the job.
I mean, the police commander here in Sydney was telling me that his police officers come from the Central Coast, Western Sydney, mainly particularly in the Blue Mountains, and Illawarra, and they stay here and they've got to sleep in cars because they cannot get access to affordable housing.
We need to do better.
Yeah, and we do, which is very important. AI, it's the big topic. I mean, everyone's talking about PTP or whatever it's called, or AI and all these things, you know, where you type in stuff on the internet and all of a sudden you get your essay or you get your assignment done. Thoughts on AI and what impact it's going to have on technology and on jobs specifically, because that's going to be big.
Well, I'd love to be going through university now with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It might have helped me get through some of the papers I struggle with. Look, I think there's a real opportunity, but also some big threats around it. So let's start with the opportunities. This is a technology that, well controlled, will help us in all of our businesses because it takes knowledge and a whole raft of data and photos and the likes and creates faster answers, or at least work and research faster than we've ever seen. I recently took all of my executive team up to Seattle to see Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Accenture and Bain, and a number of their customers that were using artificial intelligence. And can I just say, I have never taken a full executive team anywhere in the world ever in my days. I thought it was essential when went up and found out what was really going on with artificial intelligence. And I was delighted we did. And we spent 4 days in the company of these companies that are at the forefront of either developing or purchasing companies that are developed or are implementing already in companies. And we came back with about a list of about 200 areas we thought we could initially investigate using artificial intelligence in our business. And we've started doing some simple development work. We picked up 300 licenses. These licenses are actually quite scarce and not being given to everybody, so we're a big client of these firms. They gave us 300 licenses that we could use internally. Now, I get to the threats of this, because if we start using your data and it finds its way outside our environment, that is a major threat for a bank, because your data is your data and we should be using it for your good, not for putting it out and giving it to anybody else, is my view. But we've started looking at how could we do things faster and simpler with all the data we currently have, and using it for the betterment of our bankers and also our customers, and getting answers for customers faster. So I'll give you an example of something we're trialling, but we haven't put it out there yet. You can go into our web page anytime you like, and there's data in that web page. Lots and lots of data. You'd find your way through some of it. You'd be confused by the vast majority of it. But we put a artificial intelligence engine on the front end of it, and in 3 days, we could ask that portal of ours questions, and in 3 days, we had the answers 98% right after 3 days. Which meant that if you went in and you asked this thing a question, it would go into all the data sets and it would say, here's the answer. Now, get 98% right, and to be quite honest, 98 for us isn't probably enough. So we're not unleashing it yet, but you can imagine another month, it'll probably be 99, I think you go to 99.9 and we'll be able to unleash it. But that was just making it easier for customers. Our whole aim is easier for you to ask a question and get an answer and have it right. And we're starting to do that internally inside the business, and we're starting to look at all sorts of ways we could use all of the massive amounts of data we have to make it easier for our bankers and for our customers, and that's what we're going to use it for. So I think there is a real opportunity, but the dangers of this, if this data gets out, or we don't have these machines properly controlled, and we don't have a human over the top looking at the sense that they're making, these machines do what's called hallucinate. They take the reality of what they see and they can add stuff to it that's not real to make an answer. So you have to have a human being looking at it, but it's learning all the time. ChatGPT, I think it was version 3, did not pass the American law bar. 6 months later, ChatGPT version 4 passed the law bar exams. Right, 6 months, not passing, to passing. The dangers of a lot of this is that they can take 3 seconds of your voice and duplicate your voice, and it's not even you. All right, so there's another piece of danger. I do actually rely on your voice at times to identify you. Many banks do. We rely on your facial recognition. Well, how long is it going to take before your face is not your face? So all of these are the things that we're having to think about as part of this artificial as we look at it at a bank.
Well, if you watch Mission Impossible, you can have a different face. So I could get a face like yours and vice versa.
Want one like mine, but good luck.
Well, not mine. I mean, at the end of the day...
but it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. It is amazing. I mean, if you look at the technology of just the mobile phone, I mean, if you remember, some of you may remember Dick Tracy, and we always used to laugh at Dick Tracy when he had the phone on his wrist, and then you had Maxwell Smart, if anyone remembers Maxwell Smart, and the phone was in the shoe, right? So look at the technology and where we've moved to. And my concern, and I think a lot of people's concern, what are our children's future jobs with technology having such an impact? And what are those jobs? What is the jobs of the future? It can't just all be Uber drivers or Uber Eat delivery person and vice versa, can it?
Well, what we saw with, it was Accenture put up this chart of the companies they thought that would have the most jobs disrupted by artificial intelligence over a short to medium period of time. And then those businesses that would have the least disruption. What was really interesting at the very top was banking, because it's knowledge work, and artificial intelligence uses knowledge and recreates and does things. So there's some real opportunities in it, but the jobs will change. And over you see is with a lot of technology changes, the jobs just change. There's usually more jobs actually at the end of the day, but they change. The industry least impacted by it is actually in the mining industry. Something still has to pull the stuff out of the ground, dump it on a truck. The truck might be electronic and not have anyone in it, but the actual facilities is probably least. But even that, I think, is a record about 24% impacted.
Yeah.
So I think different industries will have different impacts, and it's going to be tough to say. What do you say to your grandkids to get into? Maybe be great builders, electricians, plumbers, all those sort of great industries, but there's some very big thinking jobs as well.
You're right about that, because we still need plumbers and electricians and builders, and we also need people in engineering and science and in the arts as well. Absolutely. So, I mean, they're the areas that we're going to. We've got a question on the floor, Ross. What is NAB's view on current affordability rates in line with APRA, and will NAB review the affordability constraints to make it easier to customers to borrow money, and in particular borrowers to enter the property market?
Yeah, just for those of you who don't know, we put on a margin on top of, let's say you're getting an interest rate that is 5.5% or 6%. We put another 3% on as an affordability margin on the top of that. You don't see it, but we judge your capability or ability to repay at a higher rate than you actually visibly see the rate. And that's been in the industry for many, many years. When interest rates were 2%, add 3, it's 5. Now that they're 6, it's 9. And the reason for that is we don't know really whether interest rates are going up or down. We always thought they were going to go down for 10 years, and everyone thought they were going to stay at 2%. Well, that was never going to be the case. The question is, should we be altering the interest rate margin, that's 3%, and bringing it down now? I at this stage don't think so. I don't think we're yet through it all. And we can adjust for individual customers anyway, all right, when we know them. And when you do a renewal of your mortgage, we actually don't even check it anyway, because you're paying. So you don't get a check at that point in time. If you've been paying, you just, it moves on. It's when you bring your business to another bank that they'll do the review. And I think prudence is still a good place to be in banking at the moment. I would just stay with a good level of prudence, and we can make some alterations for individuals if we need to.
Ross, governments are grappling with rents. And I think most of the people in this room, or not all, but a lot of us have an investment property. We've been encouraged to buy an investment property. We rent it out. But governments are now talking about having rent control. I mean, I know in many states in America they've got rent control, but if an investor is going to buy a unit or a property of some sort, to have the rent control is going to be very difficult, because if they're servicing a loan, your thoughts? I mean, have you spoken to any of the politicians to say that this is not the right thing to do?
Well, first off, I believe that it is the wrong thing to do to interfere in a market of this nature. We've had a 2-year period where, particularly last year, interest rates have gone up, and we all know it's become more difficult, but importantly, inflation's gone up and it's made it really difficult for households. Now, the problem with that is that we just don't have enough houses. So go to the root cause of this problem. Why have rentals gone up? There's not enough supply. If you had a greater supply, well, rentals would be not moving at the rate they're moving. But I think one of the things that kills these markets is uncertainty and concern that a government will do that, because there's lots to talk about. And I think those are the things that then slow down a market, is just the conversation that these things could come in. Or very quick moves, as you've seen in Victoria, for example, where there's all sorts of different taxes being coming onto landlords and property owners and the likes. Those are the things that I think actually do damage a market over time. Markets like certainty more than anything else. You get certainty, you know the rules, you get on and play within the rules. I think putting rental caps and limitations on, I think will defeat the purpose in the long term. You might get a short-term period of holding rentals, but then people just get out of the market, and then you actually decrease the amount of supply in the market. So I'm not one for false moves on these sorts of things. My view is, within controls, let the market get on with its job.
Ross, I'm conscious of time. Have you got some time? Just a couple more questions. Quick questions. Yeah. How many in the room carry cash? Although that's probably a stupid question at an Australian Lebanese country. Most of you might. I mean, if you go to a Greek function or an Italian function, we all carry cash, right? And as Vince Sorrenti says, he loves being paid by cash. How many in the room do have cash on them now? So, yeah. I've got no money in my pocket. So you can sort of see, Ross, and I'm assuming you have no cash on you.
Well, I think there's another question. Who's got cash, but when was the last time you put cash across the counter?
Yeah.
I think that's another. I mean, don't steal my wallet, because it's only got about $110 of cash in it. But I think it's been there for about 6 or 12 months. So I think there's actually more cash in the market circulating, but less of it coming into the banking system. So it's an interesting play. There's more in circulation, but less being used. And as I said when I was talking before, that 99% of our transactions now are completely cashless. It's all electronic. So across the counter, it's just dropped like a stone. It's dropping at about 16 to 20% a year, and has been for the last 5 to 6 years. And cheques, now they're going to go by 2030, according to the government. Wouldn't it be good to see them out a bit earlier? But they have been dropping like a stone as well, probably about 20-25% a year drop in cash cheque usage. The biggest user of a cheque is the government.
Yeah, it's a big issue, and there are a lot of small businesses out there. They're starting to use Apple Pay and all the other, you've got your own sort of.
We've got our own
NAB
what's
merchant
it called? Terminals, yes.
Yeah, what's that called?
Or NAB.
It's NAB, sorry, because others have got. I mean, I think Commonwealth Bank had Albert.
Don't confuse customers.
No, I don't want to confuse. No, I look at
NAB Merchant.
NAB Virtual, is it?
Merchant,
right? Merchant. Okay, well that's great. If you need a NAB Virgin, not Virgin, version. Oh boy, have I got myself into that one. Anyway, let's move. So cashless, it's a big issue, and I'm hoping that NAB can support a lot of their small and medium-sized businesses move to technology that will able to,
I think what's happening is there's less cash being used. It's not cashless. It's less cash. There will, I think, always be a place for cash in society. The fact that we don't use it. I can remember 5 years ago when I was living in the UK, my wife and I were going to Sweden for a weekend, and I forgot to pick the cash up. And we got there, and the only one place that would have been helpful to have had cash was at the public toilets. The rest, nobody wanted it 5 years ago. Just wouldn't take it off you, card or nothing. Now, we're not there, and I think we'll be less cash, not cashless in Australia. And it is quietly, we're just tapping and using a card, and sending money by phone is where it's all going at the moment.
There's another question from the floor, and it's the elephant in the room, and I have to ask you. I mean, bank closures, it's a big issue, you know, and everyone's doing it. It's not just yourselves or, you know, CommBank or anyone else. I mean, technology is now moving at such a pace that, you know, I don't think I've ever walked in. I can't remember the last time I walked into a bank branch, and, you know, everything is done now online. Where do you see that interaction, the public interaction, face-to-face interaction going for the banking industry?
Yeah. Look, it is clear that the number of branches available has got less and less. And we've actually increased the number of what we call points of presence that we have, where you can interact with us with cash or cheques or whatever with an account, because we've linked in with Australian Post. Now, Australia Post have about 3,500 places you can go and put cash into a NAB account, or take it out of a NAB account, or put a cheque or your business takings across. 3,500 places. We didn't have that 5 years ago. But the overall number of our own branded branches has dropped by probably about 60 this year. And it comes back to the two stats that I gave you, that cash utilisation across the counter is coming off at about 16 to 20% per annum, has been for years. And also cheque usage is falling like a stone. And if you don't have those and you've got a mobile phone or an app, you're going in for advice or support or something of that. So we'll always have a network, and we'll treasure our network because it'll be there to support customers and business customers, but it just won't be as big as it was 5 years ago. That's just a reality. And businesses make their determination, but we've got a number of customers who are vulnerable. We've got a lot of business customers that still want to interact that way, but the utilisation of Australia Post actually supports their business model, which means that they stay in those communities longer as well, which is a good thing in my mind.
Ross, the last question, and I'm asking you for a tip. Now, it's not for Melbourne Cup, but if you've got a tip for Melbourne Cup,
No.
I think everyone in the room would be interested. But you've got the AFL and NRL grand finals, and I know that you are from Victoria, and we don't mind you coming up here. We'd like you to come up here more often, spend more money in Sydney specifically, because we love Sydney, but we also love Melbourne, of course. But your thoughts on the AFL?
No idea. My team... North Melbourne. Anybody else? Am I the only one who supports North Melbourne?
No, there's someone over there.
There's one more.
Yeah.
We always find one in a room.
Yeah.
Well done.
I don't know who it is. He might be. Is he with? Yeah, 10% off the fees. Okay, there you go. There you go.
So
Fantastic.
they're not anywhere near the final. I think we finished second to bottom. We've got Melbourne playing this weekend. We'll give them a run, shall we?
Yeah.
I've got no idea, to be
Okay.
honest. The other one, of course, the NRL.
Yes.
You've got to back the Melbourne Storm.
Well,
Huh?
yeah. Well, they are from your team,
Exactly.
from your
Well, you
state.
asked me.
Yeah.
And
No,
then the
no.
other sporting event that you've forgotten to, which is much more important of all of those because it's an international sport,
Rugby?
is the rugby.
Yeah.
And that starts this weekend with the All Blacks playing France, first game at the stadium. Put your money on the Kiwis. Come on, you Aussies. Come on, back
I
us.
like it.
Because I'm backing the Australians to get into the semi-finals. You heard it here.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
Now,
I may be wrong.
Now, just quickly, and I know I shouldn't ask this question, but now you brought it up. Everyone's talking about, or not everyone, a lot of people are talking about whether New Zealand should be another state of Australia. Thoughts?
Let's be honest. Australia doesn't want us and we don't want you.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I mean, we love each other. We love each other, don't we?
Well, we do. We're lovers, not fighters, as I mentioned to you before.
We
Hence why I
love
got
each other,
everyone to hug each other. So,
Yeah.
here, when it comes to Lebanese, Greeks and Italians, we love everyone, boy, girl, whatever.
Well, look, I think we've got the best of both worlds with CER, where you can operate in New Zealand and New Zealanders can operate in Australia as though we were cousins or brothers. I think that's the ideal world, and we're always going to fight it out on the sporting field, doesn't matter what it is, and we should never lose that.
Beautiful. Friends, please put your hands together and thank Ross McEwan for a fantastic opportunity to give us that special opportunity today. And it's not every day, and I give praise to the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce for getting Ross. I mean, it's not every day that you can get these managing directors and CEOs, because they've got a huge task in trying to manage staff, but managing their own banks and everything that goes with it. So, Ross, thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you. It's an honour and a pleasure, actually, to meet you and to engage with you today. And thank you for your frankness and your openness in that regard. And it now gives me great pleasure to call on Dr. Shane Giha, the founder of EG Funds and the sponsor of the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce, to give the vote of thanks. And I also like to, while I've got the opportunity, to call on Sam Nicholas to present you with also a gift of appreciation, and I'm hoping it's one of those whiskies that Sam makes down in Tasmania.
Thank you, Paul. I think today I was privileged, as I'm sure you were, to hear one of the true icons of the financial industry address us. Mr. Ross McEwan, Commander of the British Empire, I would suggest has come a long way from Hastings High School. Coming from Hastings High Schools to run an $89 billion corporation, I would have thought is a little bit like Sir Donald Bradman moving from Bowral to captain the 1948 Invincibles. So that's an analogy we're proud of. Today, I think we heard about how important it was for the economy to be resilient. I think also today we heard that AI is going to come and make an absolute difference to everything we do. But I think today we also heard that we need more than 150,000 migrants, and that we need to house them somewhere in this great city and others. When I think of the problems that Mr. McEwan talked about today, I can't help but think of the words of the great Justice Sutherland in 1926, who invented the concept of zoning that changed the way we process applications. There were so many rules in the US within 6 months of the introduction of the zoning code that everyone was so confused about how they would get things approved. And Justice Sutherland had this to say. He said, whenever I'm confused about the rules, I only just think of one rule. Salus populi suprema lex est, which is Latin for the welfare of the people is the supreme law. Ladies and gentlemen, whenever we hear a great speaker like we heard today, I always am reminded of the words of Aristotle in the 5th century BC, who said in 423 BC that any great speaker can convince you of their view if they can do one of 3 things: ethos, pathos, logos, ethics, empathy, knowledge. For that, we should thank Mr. Ross McEwan, Commander of the British Empire.
Dr. Shane, it's always a pleasure to hear from you and give the thank you as usual. Mr. McEwan, welcome, and thank you so much for your attendance, flying all the way from Melbourne. Hopefully it was an enjoyable lunch for you, and maybe you didn't drink too much whiskey. We'll give you some more if you want. On this note, we leave you with a thank you from our artist, Mr. Michel Risk, depicting some picturesque of the wilderness and the outback of Australia. Thank you, and welcome again. Thanks so much.